Sometimes love isn't enough. As an adoptive mom, people would often say this to me, as if to imply I couldn't love my son enough to change behaviors or heal his trauma, so I should probably just give up. At least that's how I took those four powerful words, which had buried themselves deeply in my mind, leading me to doubt my ability to parent my child. Sometimes love isn't enough. That is the truth. Oftentimes, you need love and powerful, personalized tools to raise a child who's experienced trauma and disrupted attachment, or a child who you're struggling to connect with. I am on a mission to help parents raising kids with a tricky past to show up with unconditional love and practical tools to lovingly manage even the most challenging of times. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Plus, if you like what you hear, I'd love for you to leave a review. Now let's get to the good stuff. Welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I am your host, Angie Grandt, and I am just so excited to have you here for today's episode. So, in this episode, I want to talk about our kids' intuition and what I have experienced and heard from many parents now as I encounter more and more parents raising kids who've experienced a tricky past is that, you know, uh, I believe that all kids are born to have a strong sense of intuition. I think that it's part of our nature. I now see that it is in our design, our human design, to have an instinctual awareness center. It's part of all of us. Some of us have more what's called definition there than others, meaning that some of us have more of a lesson plan or a curriculum or more ability to tap into our instinctual awareness than others. But nonetheless, we all have some sort of instinctual awareness. But what I have learned, like I said, as my personal experiences and interacting with other parents, is that kids who have experienced a tricky past, kids who have experienced trauma in particular, have a heightened sense of instinctual awareness. It's part of their survival. When we think about kids who have experienced trauma or neglect early on, they have had to have a heightened sense of instinctual awareness in order to just survive. They have had to put more of their energy, as their brain was developing, into enhancing their ability to be astutely aware of what's happening around them. So these are the kids who have a heightened sense of fight, flight, or freeze, who are oftentimes in a heightened state of alert, ready to pounce or run or whatever they need to do to protect themselves. Unfortunately, when our kids experience early trauma, early neglect, their amygdala is larger because it is firing more often than is kind of the norm, which also then oftentimes can have an impact on other parts of the brain that aren't growing and developing the way that they should, because this little child's body is putting its energy into survival. But what we also know then about kids who have experienced early trauma is that they can, as they get older, live in this constant state of hypervigilance, which I remember many years ago, I was supposed to be giving an autism training, and it was for some local emergency responders. And it was a full day or a couple of days of mental health trainings. And so autism was on the agenda. It was my job to go in and give the autism training. And I came in to the tail end of a training about trauma. And I remember just really wrapping my head around the way that they were describing that Somebody who had experienced trauma will have a very different response if they walk into a room, a classroom, or maybe there's some crisis happening in a room. It doesn't really matter. But if somebody with uh, who's experienced trauma walks into a room, they will have a very different recollection of what they see. If they're later asked, what was happening in the room, they'll have a very different recollection than somebody, for example, who has autism, because their brains are wired to look for different details, look for different things in the room because of that amygdala overfiring. And so when we think about our kids um, when we think about our kids that they are in this constant state of hypervigilance, they're keenly aware of what's happening around them. As I learn more and more about human design, it makes so much sense that our kids who have experienced early trauma, their amygdala is firing way more than it probably needs to. And then, as a result, we see these kids who are hypervigilant. They're very aware of what's happening around them at all times. It makes so much sense then when, for example, I remember example after example, and I've heard similar stories of as parents wanting to put on our game face, right? We might be feeling frustrated or overwhelmed or annoyed or afraid or whatever we're feeling. And we go to pick our kids up, and our kids immediately are saying, "Why are you mad at me? What's wrong, mom?" And as parents, we're thinking, I thought I did such a better job of hiding it. I thought that I did a good job of putting my game face on so that my kiddo didn't know how I was feeling. But our kids who have experienced early trauma have this keen awareness of what's really going on, a keen ability to tap into their intuition in ways that I think perhaps many of the rest of us have been conditioned to not trust, to not see. So, when we think about, as I started this episode talking about, we are all designed to have this instinctual awareness of what's happening around us, to have gut responses to things. But we tend to be conditioned to not trust that. We tend to be conditioned to think that our mind knows what's best for us, that we need to make decisions from our mind, not from our gut. What could your gut possibly know? It didn't go to school, it didn't study the books. What could your gut possibly know, or your instinctual awareness know about what's best for you? But we're all designed to have this instinctual awareness about what's best for us, for each of us individually. We all are designed that way. And we're all conditioned to trust our mind first. But our mind doesn't actually know. Our mind has been taught what society wants us to know, think is best for us, right? But our kids who've experienced trauma have a little bit more, hmm, maybe ability to tap into this instinctual awareness, perhaps because theirs is louder, because it has to be, because their amygdala is saying, hey, watch out. You need to be prepared. You never know what's going to happen next. And so perhaps our kids who have experienced trauma have a louder, I put that in air quotes, but a louder instinctual awareness center that is speaking louder to them and that they trust more. Because as I said, our kids know what we're thinking and feeling oftentimes before we do. As long before I knew about human design, I would find this so fascinating. At first, very frustrated, if I'm being honest. Like, no, who are you to tell me that I'm mad? I'm not mad, but I actually was. But I didn't want my son to see that I was mad. And so I would get defensive about him essentially accusing me of being mad when I was trying so hard to not be mad. So When we're thinking about our kids' intuition, what a beautiful gift that we could give them to learn how to trust their intuition, to learn how to see what's right for them, as opposed to teaching our kids what we think is right for them. Because we're not in our kids' bodies. We do not have our kids' unique energy blueprint. Ours is different. Ours is different than theirs. So, what if we had the ability to really teach our kids to trust their gut or to listen to their gut? And but not in a way where our kids who've experienced trauma, that's all they hear, right? That's all they hear is their instincts telling them. And then they're almost not able to hear the feedback from other people, right? I think back to those examples of me trying so hard to not be angry, not be frustrated, and my son really seeing that in me. I think back and think like, as I was trying to say, like, no, I'm not mad. I'm happy to be here. That was my truth. Of course, part of me was still frustrated, but my truth was that I was happy to be there. But his instinct was so strong that he wasn't able to hear my words and to hear that, okay, yeah, part of me is afraid or part of me is mad, but a big part of me isn't. A big part of me is here with you and I'm happy to be with you. So, as we're thinking about raising our kids, thinking about how to support them and trusting their own intuition, this is something I want to suggest that maybe you ponder is how much are you supporting your kids and trusting their gut? And how much are you supporting your kids and thinking that their mind has all of the right answers for them? Because I believe perhaps that maybe it's a balance of both. Perhaps it's a balance of teaching our kids to trust themselves, which is one of the resiliency keys, but also teaching them to listen, teaching them to hear other people's perspectives. And when we're raising kids who've experienced tricky things in their past, um, perhaps part of our role is to help them see that, yes, your instincts are strong. They are so strong and they have served you so well. But let's figure out how to also understand that maybe sometimes your instincts, when you've experienced tricky things, perhaps your instincts are overfiring, giving you too much feedback that might not be necessary to make your current decision about what's happening now, right? Helping our kids to trust themselves, but also to, you know, consider other possibilities as well. So, as I wrap up this episode, the one thing that like I said, I've been learning so much about human design and I knew this about my son early on, right? That he had this keen awareness about what was happening around him. And I found it fascinating. Part of me was sad that his brain had the experiences that put him in that position. But part of me thought, wow, how refreshing that he has this ability to really sense what's happening around him. Where, my gosh, I have no idea what my gut is telling me, or I didn't. I do now. I'm definitely learning to listen to my gut more. But 10 years ago, I did not. I didn't even think my gut had anything to say. I thought my mind had to make all of my decisions for me. And I found it so interesting and so beautiful that he had this ability that I did not have. But as I was looking at his chart, his human design chart, I found it fascinating that my son, his instinctual awareness center is lit up like a Christmas tree. He has so much definition there and so many lessons to learn in life. It's how he was designed from before he was born. It is his blueprint in life, is to really tap into and understand his instinctual awareness and what lessons he has to learn in life about that. So I did this little um, project to look up what his life purpose is. And I find this so fascinating. I know you probably don't know my son, but you know that he has been through tricky things, and as have I with him. But his life purpose is revolves around mastering struggle, provoking transformation, seeking depth, and learning control, often through trial and error or deep investigation. He's here to help himself and others grow by pushing through challenges, provoking necessary changes, and sharing wisdom gained through personal experiences. When I read that and really compared it to what I know about my son, oh my goodness, what a beautiful reflection of who he truly is and always has been, and how watching it unfold in his life now and watching it play out, and how he's really using his keen sense of instinctual awareness to really help others, to really dig deep and really understand others. I think it's just so beautiful. So, anyways, if you're ready to really understand your life's purpose and how to tap into it, how to trust your gut, book a call. My info is always at the bottom in my show notes. So thanks so much for listening. I hope that you found this episode powerful as well. We will chat soon. I hope that you found this episode so incredibly powerful. Thank you for joining us for Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. If you resonated with what you heard here, please subscribe to this podcast and give us a review. You can also follow us on all the socials. Check the show notes for all the details about how to start tackling behaviors and creating a powerful, loving relationship with your child, a child who needs your love the most. And if your gut's telling you that it's time for a change now, book a free consult. I'd love to help you love unconditionally and show you that you have that power within you.